Keanu Reeves found healing in the wild. Could rescuing a bear cub change his life forever? Find out how one act of kindness transformed everything. Keanu Reeves had spent years in the public eye, constantly in the spotlight, and never really having a break from his busy career. After facing a lot of emotional struggles and personal losses, he decided it was time for a change. He needed time away from everything: no phones, no social media, and no constant demands. Keanu knew that the only way to heal was to disconnect completely, so he decided to take a long vacation to the remote wilderness of Wrangell, Alaska. Wrangell is known for its untouched beauty and the wildness of the Tongass National Forest. It was the perfect place for Keanu to escape. He had heard about the peacefulness of this place and how it could offer a kind of calmness that would help him clear his mind. The cold, quiet surroundings were just what he needed, and he hoped that by being surrounded by nature, he could finally find the peace he had been searching for. Keanu had faced a lot of heartache in his life. He had lost people close to him, and it had taken a toll on him emotionally. For years, he had been caught up in the noise of his career and the constant demands of his public life. But in this remote corner of the world, Keanu hoped to find the time and space to heal. He was ready to face his grief and figure out how to move forward. The stillness of the forest would be the perfect place to reflect and think without any distractions. The beauty of the Alaskan wilderness was overwhelming. It was a place where the mountains met the sky, and the trees stretched high above him, creating a natural canopy that felt like a world all on its own. The snow-covered ground seemed endless, and the crisp, cold air was like a wake-up call to Keanu's senses. There were no loud noises or busy streets here. Just nature in its purest form. Keanu could finally breathe deeply and clear his mind. This vacation wasn't just about getting away from everything, it was a chance for him to reconnect with himself. The loneliness of the wilderness didn't scare him, instead, it felt comforting. The forest didn't judge him, didn't expect anything from him. It just was. And for the first time in a long while, Keanu felt like he could just be too. He had always loved the idea of nature's healing power, and now, here in the Alaskan wilderness, he hoped to experience it for himself. The mountains, the trees, the cold winds, everything around him seemed to speak in a way that words couldn't. In the peace of the forest, Keanu began to realize that this vacation was more than just a break. It was a chance for him to let go of the things that weighed him down and to start over. He wasn't just seeking solace, he was looking for a fresh start, a new chapter of his life where he could leave the past behind and move forward with a clearer heart. In the stillness of Wrangell, Alaska, Keanu Reeves found the space to breathe, to reflect, and most importantly, to heal. The wilderness had a way of offering peace like nothing else could. It was here, surrounded by the quiet of nature, that Keanu would take the first steps on his journey to healing. Keanu Reeves had been hiking through the snowy forest, enjoying the peaceful solitude of his vacation. The cold air was refreshing, and the quiet of the wilderness gave him the space he needed to think. But as he walked along the snow-covered trail, he heard something strange, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like a whimper. At first, he thought it might be the wind or an animal in the distance, but as he listened more closely, he realized it was coming from somewhere nearby. The sound was soft and desperate, and it instantly caught his attention. Keanu's instincts kicked in. Even though he was alone and had come here to escape everything, he couldn't ignore the sound of distress. Something was wrong. He followed the whimper through the trees, his heart starting to race as he moved closer to the source of the noise. The forest was eerily still, and the snow beneath his boots crunched with every step. He was already far from the cabin, but the sound drew him further into the woods, his curiosity and concern growing stronger. Finally, he spotted the source of the noise, a small bear cub, half buried in the snow beneath a cedar tree. The cub was shivering uncontrollably, its fur matted with ice and snow. It looked fragile and weak, its tiny body barely moving. Keanu's heart sank as he took in the sight. The cub was all alone, and it was in desperate need of help. There were no signs of its mother nearby, and the snow around the cub was undisturbed, which only made the situation more concerning. The absence of the mother was alarming, and Keanu knew the cub couldn't survive long in these conditions without help. Without wasting any time, Keanu knelt beside the cub, his breath visible in the cold air. He could see how weak the cub was, its eyes barely open, and its tiny body trembling. Keanu knew he couldn't just leave it there. The thought of walking away from an animal in need was unbearable. His decision was clear: he had to help. Keanu carefully wrapped the cub in his scarf, making sure not to hurt it. The cub was freezing, its small body stiff from the cold, and Keanu felt a deep sense of responsibility for its survival. He gently lifted the cub into his arms, cradling it close to his chest for warmth. The weight of the responsibility felt heavy, but there was no turning back now. The cub was depending on him. The journey back to the cabin was going to be difficult. The snow was deep, and Keanu was far from the warmth of the cabin. But there was no other choice, he had to get the cub back to safety. Every step felt like a challenge as he carried the fragile creature through the forest, the cold biting at his skin. The cub's tiny body was stiff and cold against him, but Keanu refused to give up. He wasn't going to let the cub die alone in the snow. As he walked, Keanu felt a deep connection to the cub. Despite his desire for solitude, something about this moment felt right. He was doing something important, something that gave him a sense of purpose. The weight of the cub in his arms reminded him that, even in the coldest, loneliest places, life still needed care and attention. And he was going to make sure this little cub had a chance at survival. Keanu finally made it back to the cabin, the weight of the bear cub in his arms a constant reminder of the responsibility he had taken on. The cold had already begun to seep into the small cabin, and he knew he needed to act quickly to help the cub. Keanu walked over to the fireplace and carefully placed the cub on a thick blanket beside it. His hands were shaking, not just from the cold but from the worry that the cub might not make it. He quickly grabbed some dry wood and lit a fire, the crackling flames offering some warmth and light. The fire didn't just warm the cabin, it was Keanu's hope for the cub's survival. As the fire grew, he turned to his supplies. He didn't have much, but he had a can of condensed milk and some honey. He mixed them together, hoping it would be enough to give the cub some strength. He gently dipped his finger into the warm mixture and offered it to the cub, who was shivering violently. At first, the cub didn't respond, but after a few attempts, it licked at the liquid, weak but determined. Keanu let out a quiet sigh of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As he continued to feed the cub, his mind drifted. The silence of the cabin was deafening, and Keanu found himself alone with his thoughts. As he gently fed the cub, he couldn't help but think about his own pain. The grief he had carried for so long, the loss of loved ones, and the emptiness that had followed him for years, it all came rushing back. The act of caring for this small, fragile life brought it all to the surface. He had been running from his own feelings, hiding in the wilderness, but now, facing the struggle of helping the cub, he had no choice but to confront them. The cub, now named Ash, was not just a distraction for Keanu, it was a way for him to process his own grief. As he worked tirelessly to help Ash survive, he realized that by caring for this creature, he was also beginning to care for himself again. The sense of purpose that had been missing from his life slowly began to return. He found himself thinking less about the past and more about the future, about Ash's survival and the bond that was growing between them. Days passed, and Ash grew stronger, his shivers turning into small, confident movements. Keanu spent his time feeding him, keeping him warm, and watching over him. In these quiet moments, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of connection. The forest had been a place of solitude, but now, with Ash by his side, it felt different. The cub was dependent on him, and in turn, Keanu felt needed. The weight of that responsibility was a reminder that life still had purpose, and even in the hardest moments, there was still room for growth and healing. As Ash slowly recovered, Keanu reflected on how this small act of saving a life had begun to save him as well. He no longer felt the same emptiness he had before. Caring for Ash had given him a new focus, a new sense of hope. It was a reminder that, even in the most difficult times, there was always a chance for a new beginning. The connection between Keanu and Ash was something unexpected, but it had become the most important thing in Keanu's life, and it was helping him heal in ways he hadn't imagined. As the days passed, Keanu noticed that Ash was becoming stronger. The little bear cub, who had once been barely able to move, was now beginning to show more life in his tiny body. Keanu decided it was time to take Ash outside for short walks, but only when it was safe. The snow-covered clearing around the cabin was perfect for these little outings. Keanu bundled Ash up in warm blankets, making sure he was secure before stepping outside. At first, Ash was cautious. The cold air seemed to surprise him, and his tiny paws sank into the snow with each step. But Keanu was patient, always close by to guide him. As they walked together, Keanu began to see Ash's personality start to emerge. The cub started sniffing around, his nose twitching as he explored the unfamiliar environment. He would nudge at the snow, paw at it, and even try to climb small mounds of snow, his curiosity growing with every moment. Keanu couldn't help but smile as he watched Ash. The little cub was showing more and more signs of independence. With each walk, Ash grew stronger and more confident. He was no longer shivering from the cold but instead was becoming more active and curious about the world around him. Keanu would watch Ash move through the snow, his small body determined despite his weakness in the beginning. He would sometimes trip over his own feet, but then quickly get up and continue exploring. The cub's resilience was inspiring to Keanu. It reminded him of how, even in the toughest situations, life has a way of pushing through. No matter how difficult the journey, survival was possible with strength and determination. As Keanu walked alongside Ash, he started to feel something deeper. It wasn't just about taking care of a helpless animal. He realized that Ash's journey to recovery was also helping him heal from his own pain. Keanu had come to Alaska to escape, to process his own grief, and he had found solace in the silence of the forest. But now, through helping Ash, he felt like he was slowly recovering himself. Watching Ash grow stronger and learn to navigate the harsh wilderness was a reminder to Keanu that healing takes time. Just as Ash was learning to survive and thrive again, Keanu was slowly finding his own path toward healing. The bond between Keanu and Ash grew with each passing day. They were both recovering, though in different ways. Keanu had been lost in his grief for so long, but now, with the cub's survival in his hands, he had a new purpose. Ash had given him something to focus on, a reason to keep moving forward, and in doing so, Keanu began to heal. The process wasn't fast, but it was steady, and the small victories, Ash taking his first few steps outside, his curious exploration of the world, were moments that Keanu held on to. They were reminders that even the smallest steps toward recovery mattered. And together, Keanu and Ash were proving that healing was possible, no matter how long it took. The days had passed, and Ash was growing stronger each day. Keanu had watched the little cub transform from a fragile, shivering creature into a lively, curious animal. It had been a tough journey for both of them, but now, the cub was getting healthier, and Keanu could see that it was time for Ash to move on. One day, Keanu received a message from a wildlife sanctuary that specialized in rescuing and rehabilitating animals. They had heard about Ash and were ready to take him in. They could give Ash the care he needed to fully recover, and eventually, they would release him back into the wild where he truly belonged. Keanu knew that this was the best option for the cub. Ash needed more than what Keanu could offer. He needed the expertise of professionals who could ensure he would be able to survive in the wild on his own. Despite knowing this was the right decision, Keanu couldn't help but feel torn. The thought of letting Ash go felt impossible. After all, they had been through so much together. Keanu had nurtured Ash back to health, and their bond had grown stronger with each passing day. The cub had become more than just an animal he was taking care of. Ash had become a companion, a reminder of Keanu's own healing process. Keanu found himself standing in the cabin, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision. He had spent so much time with Ash, talking to him, caring for him, and watching him grow stronger. It wasn't just about letting go of the cub, it was about letting go of the healing process Keanu had found in caring for him. The thought of saying goodbye made his chest tighten. But Keanu knew this was the right thing to do. He had already given Ash everything he could, and now it was time to let go. He had to trust that the sanctuary would give Ash the best chance at life, and that this was the next step in Ash's journey. It wasn't easy, but Keanu had come to realize that letting go was a part of the healing process, both for Ash and for himself. The day came when the sanctuary's team arrived to take Ash away. Keanu walked outside to meet them, his emotions swirling inside. He cradled Ash in his arms one last time, feeling the warmth of the cub against his chest. Ash had come so far, and Keanu couldn't help but feel proud of how strong the cub had become. He whispered softly to him, his voice shaky but filled with reassurance. "You're going to be okay. You're strong. I'll always remember you," Keanu said, holding Ash close. The team from the sanctuary was kind and professional, understanding how difficult this moment was for Keanu. They gently placed Ash in a special crate designed for animals in transition. Keanu looked down at Ash one last time, seeing the cub's dark eyes looking back at him. It was as if Ash understood the change. With a final kiss on his head, Keanu stepped back and watched as the sanctuary team drove away, taking Ash to a new chapter in his life. As the vehicle disappeared from view, Keanu stood there, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. He had done his part. He had given Ash a chance at life, and now it was time for him to let go. The silence of the forest around him felt different now, and Keanu knew he would always carry the memory of the cub with him. Keanu stood outside the cabin, watching as the sanctuary's truck slowly pulled away, its tires crunching through the snow. Inside the truck, Ash was on his way to a new life, one filled with the care and attention he needed to fully recover. Keanu felt a deep ache in his chest as he watched the vehicle disappear into the distance, but deep down, he knew it was the right decision. Ash needed the sanctuary to give him the best chance of survival, and Keanu had given him everything he could. As the truck drove out of sight, Keanu was left standing in the quiet of the forest. The cold air stung his cheeks, but it felt different now. The forest, which had once felt alive with the presence of the cub, was now eerily silent. Keanu looked around at the snow-covered trees, the bare branches stretching high into the sky. It was as if the world had paused for a moment, allowing him to reflect on everything that had happened over the past few weeks. He thought about the journey he and Ash had shared. He remembered the first time he had found the tiny cub, freezing and alone in the snow. He had carried Ash back to the cabin, unsure of whether the cub would survive. But together, they had made it through the harshest of conditions. They had both grown stronger, Ash physically and Keanu emotionally. Through taking care of the cub, Keanu had found purpose again, and in doing so, he had started to heal from his own pain. Now, standing alone in the quiet forest, Keanu realized that he had done all he could for Ash. The cub was no longer helpless. He had grown strong and independent, and Keanu had given him the best chance at life. The decision to let go was not easy, but it had been necessary. Keanu knew that letting Ash go was part of the healing process, both for the cub and for himself. As the sound of the truck faded away, Keanu felt a sense of peace wash over him. It wasn't a loud, dramatic feeling, but a quiet understanding. He had done everything in his power to help Ash, and now the cub was ready for the next chapter of his life. Keanu had given him the tools to survive, and now it was time for Ash to live his life in the wild, just as he was meant to. Keanu turned back toward the cabin, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. The silence of the forest didn't feel as heavy anymore. It was peaceful, and it gave Keanu the space to reflect on his own journey. He had let go of the cub, but the bond they shared would always remain in his heart. Keanu knew that this chapter had ended, but it was also a new beginning for both him and Ash. As the snow continued to fall softly around him, Keanu felt ready to move forward, knowing that he had given everything he could, and in return, he had healed in ways he never expected. Keanu stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as the sanctuary's truck slowly drove away, carrying Ash to a new life. The truck's tires crunched over the snow, the sound growing quieter as it disappeared into the distance. Keanu's heart tugged with sadness, but he knew deep down it was the right decision. Ash was going to a place where he could receive the proper care and attention, where he could thrive and eventually be released back into the wild. Keanu had done everything he could to help the cub, and now it was time for him to move on. The forest around Keanu felt eerily quiet as the truck faded away. The wind whispered through the trees, but the usual warmth he felt from having Ash by his side was gone. The silence felt heavy, but it also felt peaceful. Keanu took a deep breath and let the calmness of the forest fill him. He thought about the days spent caring for Ash, the small steps, the moments of progress, and the bond they had formed. When he had found the cub in the snow, barely hanging on, he had never imagined they would come this far. Now, Ash was strong and ready to begin a new chapter of his life. Keanu realized that letting go wasn't just about Ash, it was about him too. He had come to Alaska to heal, to escape the chaos of his life, and taking care of Ash had given him a new sense of purpose. In the process of helping the cub, Keanu had started to heal from his own emotional scars. It was as if, by saving Ash, he had saved himself too. Now, with the cub on his way to the sanctuary, Keanu felt a quiet sense of peace. As the truck disappeared completely, Keanu turned back toward the cabin. He knew it would be a while before he truly felt like his life was back to normal. But today, he could finally breathe. The weight of responsibility that had been with him for so long was starting to lift. Keanu had given Ash everything he could. The bond they shared would always remain in his heart, and he would carry the memory of the cub with him forever. Keanu looked around at the snow-covered trees, the quiet beauty of the wilderness surrounding him. It was time for him to move on as well. He had come to Alaska to find peace, and he had found it. Now, it was time for him to return to his life and the work he had left behind. The time he had spent with Ash had reminded him of what truly mattered: life, connection, and healing. As Keanu walked back toward the cabin, he felt a sense of closure. It was time for him to return to his career and his work, but he would never forget the time he had spent with Ash. It had been a turning point in his life, and he would always cherish the lessons he had learned. The story of Keanu and Ash comes to a close, but the lessons they shared will stay with both of them forever. Through the difficult journey of rescuing the bear cub, Keanu found more than just a companion in the wilderness, he found healing. In taking care of Ash, he not only saved the cub's life but also began to heal his own emotional wounds. The bond they shared was a powerful reminder of how caring for others, even in the toughest times, can bring about unexpected changes in our own hearts. Sometimes, life can be overwhelming, and we may feel like we're carrying a heavy burden. But this story shows us that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a transformative impact. Keanu's decision to help Ash wasn't just about saving the cub, it was about reconnecting with himself. By focusing on someone else's survival, he found a sense of purpose that helped him move forward. It's a reminder that by helping others, we often end up helping ourselves, and through those moments of care and compassion, we begin to heal. The story also reminds us of the resilience of life. Even when things seem impossible, there is always a way forward. Ash's struggle for survival in the cold wilderness mirrored Keanu's own journey of recovery. The cub didn't give up, and neither did Keanu. They both learned that healing takes time, and that no matter how hard life gets, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. As Keanu watched Ash leave for the sanctuary, he knew that the cub was ready to begin a new chapter. And so was he. The experience with Ash had given Keanu a fresh perspective on life, and he felt ready to face whatever came next with a renewed sense of hope. The bond they shared, even in its quiet simplicity, had helped them both find strength in each other. In the end, the story is about resilience, kindness, and the power of connection. It shows us that no matter how far we've fallen, there is always a way back. A simple act of kindness can change everything, not just for others but for ourselves too. By caring for others, we allow ourselves the chance to heal, grow, and move forward. If this story has touched you, remember that every small act of kindness matters. You never know how much it can change a life, including your own. If you believe in the power of kindness and resilience, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Join us for more stories that remind us all of the importance of helping others, finding hope, and embracing the strength within us. Your support can help spread this message of hope and healing to more people, inspiring them to make a difference in their own lives and in the lives of others.